Welcome to this week's episode of the Indo-Pacific Dialogue. Today's episode is called Diplomatic Variable Geometry, Unpacking Minilateral Relations in the Indo-Pacific. Welcome to the Indo-Pacific Dialogue, your essential guide through the complex fabric of geopolitics, culture and economics that defines the Indo-Pacific today. I'm Hugh Tuckfield, the Director of the Indo-Pacific Studies Centre. Each episode, we invite experts, leaders and visionaries to share their insights on the forces driving change across the diverse landscape over the Indo-Pacific and beyond. From political tensions to technological breakthroughs, we cover the stories that matter. Join us as we unpack the dynamics of power and progress in the world's most rapidly evolving region. Get ready to engage with ideas that challenge and inform. This is the Indo-Pacific Dialogue. With a distinguished 24-year career at the State Department, Camille has played a pivotal role in shaping US diplomatic and public engagement strategies across the dynamic and complex latticework of relationships in the Indo-Pacific. A graduate of Columbia University with a master's degree in international affairs, Camille is also multilingual, speaking Mandarin Chinese amongst other languages, and champions diversity, equity and inclusion. Today, Camille joins us to unpack the multifaceted interactions that define the Indo-Pacific region. Camille, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Hugh. I'm really happy to have this chance to speak with you.
That's great. It's a real privilege for us. So let's start in terms of asking you to just elaborate on the diverse interests, goals, and strategies of countries within the Indo-Pacific region and how these contribute to the complexity of the landscape in the Indo-Pacific region, it being such a complex environment.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think the first thing to know is that the Indo-Pacific region itself is both diverse and vast. From where I sit in the United States, we recognize that the Indo-Pacific region will be the epicenter of 21st century geopolitics. It's a region that has 60% of the world's economy and 2/3 of global economic growth, and is also home to more than half of the world's population. So it is, for very obvious reasons, an important focus for the United States and for the world. In the US government, when we were working to initially develop the United States Indo-Pacific strategy, we started that process by having extensive consultations with partners all across the region to have conversations with them to understand their interest and goals and the ways in which they wanted the United States to contribute most effectively to their own goals. And we heard a lot from partners in the region. We heard from them about the need to ensure that their waters are governed and used according to international law, that there is an intense need to address the impacts of the climate crisis. Particularly, we heard that from Pacific Island countries. We heard about the need to close the region's infrastructure gap and much, much more. All of these conversations deeply informed our Indo-Pacific strategy. And that is the way that we went about developing the vision that we put forward in our strategy. And that's a vision that really is informed by partners in the region. And it's also shared by many partners in the region and beyond. The vision that we outline in the Indo-Pacific region, or in the Indo-Pacific strategy, is for a region that is free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. And we found, again, through the course of these many conversations, both in developing the strategy and in the past 2 years while we have been implementing it, that there is absolutely a diversity of goals and interest across the region, but there also is a huge amount of convergence. by countries within and beyond the region in terms of the underlying principles that we seek to advance. And these are the same underlying principles that have brought stability and prosperity to the region over the past many decades. I think it's worth mentioning that really at the core of the US Indo-Pacific strategy is a recognition that no one country can address the needs of the region alone. So it is critically important to think about the ways that we can bring together mutually reinforcing coalitions and partnerships that enable us to collectively build capacity and tackle shared problems. So that really is the core of the US Indo-Pacific strategy, and we are actively seeking many ways in which we can work together with our partners around the world to help deliver on that.
Yes, I think that in terms of its time in history, there is this great convergence and of factors, geopolitical, economic, and technology as well. And I think technology has also played a big part in bringing people together to be able to cooperate. And I think that if you see the environment as one of threats, challenges, and opportunities, the threats and the challenges can be addressed, but certainly the opportunities that exist in the Indo-Pacific region to build a better future on economics, on the climate, security is just, I mean, it seems to be unprecedented at the level of diplomacy that's undergoing at the moment. And which brings us really to the reason why we're here today, is to talk about the lattice work of partnerships that have developed in the Indo-Pacific region in the last 2 years. And I think the initiation of the US Indo-Pacific strategy and the number of other states that have developed their own individual Indo-Pacific strategies, not just states that are within the Indo-Pacific region, geographical region, but the European Union and even states as far away as Lithuania have their own Indo-Pacific strategy, which is just phenomenal. And I think this cooperation that exists presents a great opportunity. Which brings me to my next question, which is, how does the concept of an overlapping network of partnerships, and by that I'm talking about the multilateral arrangements, the minilateral arrangements, how do they impact the dynamics of the Indo-Pacific from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mentioned just in my earlier response that our core focus in the US Indo-Pacific strategy is identifying ways that we can bring overlapping partnerships together to build that collective capacity for the region. And so we have many existing bilateral relationships, some that are formal treaty alliances, some that are, various levels of partnerships. We have the existing regional architecture, multilateral architecture, and we have some of these newer, more flexible mini-lateral groupings, some of which I'm sure we'll get into discussing. The idea there is that all of these layer together and become intertwined, interwoven, and create this lattice work that then enables what our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, has referred to as diplomatic variable geometry. And I sort of love that imagery.
Yeah.
It takes me back to, high school and trying to cram for my geometry exams and figure out how things, actually fit together. But what that means is you figure out the problem that exists or the need that exists, and then look across these various partnerships to determine who is best suited to be able to provide the resources, whether that's, technical capacity or some kind of physical or financial resource, and, to provide that to meet the need. It's provides fit for purpose solutions. And that is incredibly important in a region that is as dynamic as the Indo-Pacific region with ever-changing circumstances. So we do need that ability to be, flexible and to fit our solutions to the challenges of the moment.
It's quite a contrast to the previous architecture, which was readily defined as the hub and spoke approach, which had the US as the great power, as the central figure with all its relationships at the individual country levels. But now with this lattice work, I think that Secretary of State's description of it is so perfect. It describes the complexity of it, but in the complexity, there's also simplicity as well. And that, I think, we're seeing this now in the revival of the Quad, and also the emergence of AUKUS, which was in response to changing circumstances in the Indo-Pacific and the South China Sea, etc. And how do you see that, including the US Republic of Korea trilateral arrangements as well? How do you see those as achieving the shared objectives as regional in terms of regional security and economic integration, more specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So those partnerships that you mentioned, Quad, AUKUS, the US ROK, Japan trilateral partnership, those are just a few examples. There are plenty more, but we have been collectively referring to them informally as minilateral partnerships. And these groupings, these minilateral groupings, really are effective in bringing resources and necessary cooperation on a number of the key economic, security, development challenges that we see across the region. So starting with the Quad, we think this is an excellent example of this approach. The Quad, as you and your listeners certainly know, was originally convened in response to the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, convened to provide humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And that has brought together the US, Australia, India, and Japan initially in that circumstance. And then more recently, when the Quad has been revitalized, reinvigorated, it has brought the Quad partners together to coordinate quickly with one another and to deliver tangible benefits to the region. And that has been in areas ranging from digital infrastructure to clean energy to COVID vaccines to maritime security and many other areas. Just a couple of examples there. We have the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness, and that is providing cutting-edge satellite data to countries in the Indo-Pacific region that enables them to better monitor their waters so that they can more effectively counter things like illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. There are also programs like the Quad Partnership for Cable Connectivity and Resilience, and that provides technical assistance and capacity building to develop secure undersea cables communications infrastructure. So these are just, some examples of the ways in which the Quad is delivering these really tangible benefits that the region itself has identified. as important needs. You mentioned AUKUS. AUKUS, of course, is the partnership between the US, Australia, and the UK. And this partnership really modernizes our long-standing partnership to address issues together to ensure stability and security in the region. Last year in March, we announced the optimal pathway for Australia to acquire the conventionally armed nuclear powered submarines, and we continue to work to scope a variety of advanced capabilities through AUKUS Pillar 2 that are focused on ensuring we collectively are prepared to meet the moment as security challenges and other challenges emerge in this rapidly changing environment. And then on the US ROK Japan trilateral relationship, we think back to August of last year when President Biden hosted Japanese Prime Minister Kishida and ROK President Yoon for what was a really historical summit at Camp David. And bringing the three partners together in this way is important in overcoming historical obstacles. But what it really is focused on doing is bringing the three countries into closer coordination so that collectively we can advance prosperity and security in the region. And there are a number of ways in which that cooperation between the trilateral partners is taking place. That's, including on things like increased cooperation on ballistic missile defense in light of DPRK threats, improved information sharing. It includes economic cooperation through our respective development finance institutions and mobilizing financing for quality infrastructure projects across the region. So these three partnerships, again, are not in any way the sum total of the newer minilateral groupings that we are working with and through, but they are good representation of what we are trying to do in terms of identifying and understanding the needs of the region and then working together to deliver solutions.
Yes, it's such a complex and a multi factored and nuanced situation. And I can't, if I compare it to Europe, it's the lessons learned from Europe is, perhaps it's done great things, of course, but we're always seeking to improve things. But it seems to be that the relationship building that the great powers like the United States and the other powers, Japan and India, are very paying a lot of attention to ensuring the development of relationships with the small and middle powers in the Indo-Pacific region. There's less sort of an idea of dominance, but one more of cooperation. And that seems to, in my perspective, give great flexibility, but also an ability to respond quickly to situations, whether they're natural disasters or security threats that can occur. And frequently,
That's right.
and the security threats continuously occur in the region in terms of incursions into other states' territorial waters. So in terms of how do you think going forward, how do you think this could be further developed and become even more effective in terms of policies and strategies for engagement in the Indo-Pacific region amongst, the United States as a central player and the other major states? and the small and middle powers as well.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it's really important to point out that these newer groupings that we are working with are intended to complement, not to supplant the existing regional architecture in the region. We do think it is critically important to continue to work with and through groupings like ASEAN, the Pacific Islands Forum, Indian Ocean Rim Association, but then to complement that and, of course, continue our work through bilateral relationships as well. And you asked how we can advance this going forward. Well, I think the single most important thing for us to do is to prove the value of these groupings. There are certainly those actors out there that would like to see these groupings and partnerships sidelined. And there has been a narrative put forward that they are intended to undermine existing regional architecture. So the single most important thing that we can do is demonstrate the effectiveness of the work that we are doing through these groupings by delivering really tangible benefits and solutions to problems that face the region. And that's where our focus really is. And that's certainly not just the United States, it's across the many partners that we are working with. We understand and recognize collectively that we need to be seen as delivering through these groupings and addressing the challenges that face the region. And we can do that most effectively by understanding the priorities of the region itself and seeking to address those priorities.
Yes. I think that thank you for that great answer. Do you think that sometimes that there's less attention given to the threat and challenges that exist in the Indo-Pacific region in terms of the threat to democracy, the threat to global stability and security that is underlying the whole response of these Indo-Pacific strategies? I mean, these Indo-Pacific strategies are there in response to a situation and to circumstances. But do you think that enough attention is given to say that people are becoming a bit sort of relaxed and a bit comfortable in saying, well, in terms of rights and democracy and human rights, etc., that's forgotten, and that the narrative that's being pushed by the alternative architecture that could exist in a global order is one that threatens these basic rights, like a free and open Indo-Pacific, one that challenges human rights, challenges institutions like the United Nations. Do you think that there's enough emphasis being put on, even the younger generation in terms of the importance and the value of democratic values, and that this is not just about economics or other things? These are actually about people's individual rights as liberal democracies understand them.
Yeah, I think that from a U.S. perspective, I can say, with no hesitation that we care greatly about those issues and continue to emphasize them in our diplomatic engagements, in our partnership building. Indo-Pacific, the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy itself has a strong focus on those issues. And we know, again, from the many conversations that we have had in developing the strategy and in implementing it, that it is the attention to some of these, excuse me, almost values-based priorities that often resonate the most. Excuse me, I got a little tickle in my throat there. So we hear from partners regularly that it is shared values, attention to things like human rights and good governance that resonate with people around the region, and that it is critically important to retain our focus on these issues. So from the United States perspective, we certainly don't back down from continually promoting the importance of human rights, democracy, good governance, transparency, anti-corruption, and all of that is encompassed in our Indo-Pacific strategy. Different partners have different priorities in terms of addressing those issues. But from our perspective in the United States, it's a critically important element of what our vision for the region is. And we know that it is a shared vision with so many of those countries and organizations that you mentioned earlier have their own version of.
I think that, I don't ever question the United States' position on these issues, and it's always been a leader of freedoms and liberties and democracy. I think I'm thinking of other states in the Indo-Pacific who are perhaps less focused on that. And I've always think that places like the Pacific always needs to be Pacific Islands who, there's a stronghold for democracy, but certainly faces a lot of challenges where democracy can be eroded. And other states in the Indo-Pacific. So thank you for answering that sort of area of mine, because democracy to me is like a bedrock of these Indo-Pacific strategies. So,
absolutely.
Camille, one thing we haven't touched on is the partners in the Blue Pacific. Would you like to just touch on that for a moment, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Partners in the Blue Pacific is another one of these newer, more flexible groupings. And it is really focused on bringing new momentum and driving resources and improving coordination that will fill gaps to enable the goal of the Pacific Islands achieving what they have laid out themselves in the Pacific Island Forum's 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. The Partners in the Blue Pacific, this is a good example of a partnership that started with a smaller group of initial members. And I'm not going to get the list right off the top of my head, but the US, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and one or two others were the initial partners. And then additional partners have joined in over time. Canada, Germany, I believe that the EU is an observer, France is an observer, India as an observer. And again, I may not have all of the partners exactly correct there, but it's an example of how it has evolved over time and works together with the Pacific Islands to understand their priority goals, and then, as noted, to really drive resources in that direction with the goal of helping them move forward their own strategic objectives. So it, though, goes back to my earlier point that this partnership is intended to be additive or to supplement what already exists in the region. We want to work together with the Pacific Islands Forum and across, bilateral relationships to identify the ways or the areas where there are some gaps and how the partners in the Blue Pacific can come together to help fill those gaps.
Absolutely. Yes, it's certainly such a strategically important region and facing a lot of challenges as so many other regions in the Indo-Pacific, sub-regions in the Indo-Pacific are on many different levels. So if we were just to sum up in terms of the approaches to the Indo-Pacific strategy, how would you like to describe and close on that topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start by saying we have to start always with listening. So it's about listening to our partners and allies, understanding the challenges they face, and then how we can best bring the most relevant partners together to deliver sustainable solutions. It's also really important that we lead with a positive agenda, an affirmative agenda, and identify what we stand for. That's incredibly important. And we have to go back to what I mentioned as the core focus of the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, which is that no one country can meet the needs of the region alone. We have to work together with partners to build the collective capacity. And there really are historic challenges facing the region. And that means that there is a need for unprecedented levels of cooperation. And that's why this concept of the lattice work of overlapping partnerships is so important. And lastly, we have to deliver. We have to demonstrate the effectiveness of the partnerships and provide an enduring commitment to the region. And that can best be done by demonstrating value and ensuring that partners around the region and around the globe see that value as we collectively deliver it to the region.
Well, thank you, Camille. That is a great summary and to the approach. And I think it's something that will resonate with listeners. And if they don't already know that, it should give them great sort of encouragement in terms of the work that's being done in the Indo-Pacific in terms of creating regional stability and security. So Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Camille Dawson, thank you again so much for your insights into the Indo-Pacific region. It's great to have had you speaking to us today, and I hope that we have the opportunity to have another conversation later in the year.
Well, thank you again, Hugh, for inviting me to participate in the conversation. It's been a real pleasure. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Camille Dawson. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Indo-Pacific Dialogue. We hope our discussion with Camille Dawson, Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, has provided you with deeper insights into the dynamic interplays shaping our world and our Indo-Pacific region. For more updates and in-depth analysis of geopolitical developments in the Indo-Pacific, please subscribe to our podcast. If you enjoyed listening to our podcast and would like to become a sponsor of the Indo-Pacific Dialogue, you can contact us through our website. And don't miss our next episode, The Liberty Paradox, an in-depth interview with renowned international human rights lawyer Professor David Kinley about his new book, The Liberty Paradox, where we will explore the intersection between freedoms and responsibilities, from the bustling streets of Myanmar to the digital battlegrounds of free speech, uncovering how the quest for freedom shapes our world in the most unexpected ways. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and of course, dare to know.